Hi, this is Steve with Decware. Today I have a story for you that goes back before the days of Decware that was pivotal in my becoming an amplifier designer. It's the story of my corner horns. The corner horns have been used as the reference speaker for all Decware gear ever created and continues to be, even today. The corner horn, I'll link to it in the comments, is also a do-it-yourself speaker that we offer plans for on our website. Because of its complexity to build, we have never bothered to offer it as a turnkey speaker since it would be the price of a new car. That said, this was a special speaker design for me because it was my second serious home audio design. The first home audio design I did was a disaster that I made into something wonderful after 6 years of working with it, but that's another story for another time. This speaker, the corner horn, was my introduction to the audio gods, who I have learned to trust ever since this experience happened to me in the early 90s. It all started at the foot of the steps in my friend Mike's basement. Mike is a gifted musician who had a band and practiced in his basement every week. Mike lived about a block away from me, so I attended many of these sessions. I loved the drums, and his drummer Dale was exceptional. He is what inspired me to play drums not long after. So I would sit on the bottom of the basement steps, about 7 feet away from the kick drum at chest level. The basement was small, concrete, and the music was loud. After a particularly great jam one night, I found myself walking down the alley to get home. My chest was almost sore from an hour of being beaten by the kick drum, and I was thinking to myself that there is no way an experience like that can be reproduced by a pair of speakers. Well, that was the official ping that went into the heavens and notified the audio gods that we have a live one down here. I took about 20 more steps and the images started flooding into my head. Then I found myself thinking, or could they? I saw a vertical W-shaped horn with 8 drivers per side clamshelled together. I wanted to recreate the experience of being pummeled by that drum kit right in front of me. The very next morning I got some wood and went out in the garage and started making exactly that in a 24-inch footprint and around 4 feet high. Just one, to test the concept. I didn't know that I had pinged the audio gods in the alley that night, nor did I understand that was where the flood of images came from that popped into my head. But as I started building the unit, I had incredibly strong impulses to make it better before I had even made it. Once I had satisfied the footprint and the basic angles to create the W, I was thinking about imaging and all the things I didn't like about the Klipsch corner horn. This would have a round front that would disappear in the wavefront, but then the idea came to me to make the design not only expand in the horizontal but the vertical at the same time and wrap those horn flares around the radius front. Yes, I have always been somewhat masochistic. This would create a hemispherical wavefront that no other corner horn has ever achieved so far as I knew. That, combined with the round front that you can't hear, with the drivers buried deep inside the center of the horn, should have better imaging and better depth than the Klipsch. I calculated that the 4 5¼ inch drivers inside would run full range without a crossover, and the horn would bend waves out to around 2.5 kilohertz, at which point I would create another narrow high-frequency horn with a small half-inch compression driver to handle the rest. The problem, if you can call it that, is that to have this horn flare fold out from the center in both the vertical and horizontal plane, it was going to create an enclosure with compound radius angles that are nearly impossible for any woodworker to build without also being an artist. The idea of having 4 5¼ inch drivers clamshelled inside was to have the approximate area of a single 12-inch driver, but with 4 times the speed. The build was a several-day blur of doing nothing but building the speaker and marveling at all the guidance I was receiving. By this time, I realized that there was a higher intellect feeding me ideas, probably because I would listen and do it. I finally finished the first one and drug it into the house, placed it in the corner, and listened to it. I was stunned at what I was hearing. It was exactly like the experience I was trying to recreate. Metallica was a new thing at the time, and the kick drum sounded so good on this corner horn that I wasn't certain it might be better than Dale's in the basement. It was the best bass I ever heard. I was working for a local hi-fi shop at the time, selling hi-fi and designing car audio systems. I had heard a lot of great speakers by this time in my life and was no stranger to wicked-sounding bass. Anyway, I listened to this single corner horn on the left channel with a small bookshelf speaker on the right channel for around 6 months. The sound was great, and I could only imagine what it would be like with two matched horns. The reason I listened for 6 months is because it was such a bear building, the first one, that I absolutely dreaded building the second one. I eventually forced myself to build the second one. The first one was fun. I was having a 3-day party with the audio gods and no idea what the outcome was going to be. This time I had to duplicate what I had done, and it's just not fun. I was renting during this time in my life, after having previously made it with a nice home, 2 cars and a family until I got rebooted by a divorce. So I find myself living in this janky little house with a 13 by 13 by 7 foot living room that I had everything stuffed in. I finally finished the second horn and drug it into the room to place it in the opposing corner, which I did. I had the other one playing music during this time because I knew this was going to take several hours to install the drivers in it. I noticed that from the time I brought the second horn into the room and placed it into the corner, that there was really no bass to speak of in the music I was listening to. I knew there should be, and I knew there was some kind of a problem causing it, but didn't know what it was or wanted to take the time to chase it down. I was in the middle of a surgery. I remember thinking that for whatever godforsaken reason, that there isn't any bass in here right now. There is about to be more bass than we know what to do with, because I'm about to hook this thing up and hear 2 corner horns for the first time. I installed drivers and turned it on, and there was 0 bass. Damn it. Now I have to chase down the issue. An hour later, nothing is wrong. Nothing out of phase. Plenty of bass outside in the yard. 0 bass in the room. Sounds like a high-pass filter set to 80 hertz. This was before the internet. So I measured the room and plotted the wavefronts on paper with a pencil for every frequency, which took almost a day. I realized that I had created a perfect standing wave down the exact center of the room at every frequency below 80 hertz. This would be nearly impossible to do if you were trying, even if your life depended on it. I realized it was a bittersweet success. The horn is expanding into a perfectly hemispherical wavefront from floor to ceiling and corner to corner, which no other speaker does. They were so perfect that I couldn't use them. No bass trap was going to overcome these sick room dimensions with a single standing wave directly down the center of the room. This, looking back on it, is how I know that the audio gods do shit like put you up to things and then take bets on the outcome, basically to see how you will handle it, suggesting there's more than one involved. But at the time, it put me in a foul mood that lasted for at least a month. I was really ticked off about it because I couldn't listen to my creations without moving to a new house, and that wasn't an option at the time. First, bringing in the second horn and placing it in the corner without drivers made no difference because it resonated with the other one, acting as if it were on. Then, of course, putting drivers in it and turning it on only made it even worse. Then one night after I had calmed down, I knew that I needed a comb filter effect from a driver placed above the floor to have any hope of getting any bass in this room. I didn't care if I had to sit in the corner if that's what it took. I just had to have some bass like I had before. So with great sadness, I took the speakers apart and removed the 8 5¼ inch drivers from inside and left the openings as ports. I then replaced the front of the speaker, which was blank, with a small narrow baffle size for a single 6-inch driver. The driver chosen was a Pro Audio mid-range driver that had an FS of 80 Hz in this new implementation of the horn becomes a bass amplifier. So it took the 80 hertz down to nearly 30 hertz, and man was it fast. I have listened to it with 6-inch crossoverless drivers for 30 years now. It's the best low end you will ever hear from a 6-inch driver. I am presently flat down to 22 hertz with a Lee Song full range driver. In fact, I'll leave you with a link to a demo that I gave to Phil, my QC guy, when he first started. You can hear and see it for yourself and watch his reaction to it. During that time in my life, after these were created, I was making hundreds of custom speakers, without exaggeration, for home, car, and pro audio applications. I did exclusively that for several years. Each one was a conversation with the audio gods, which then later extended to amplifiers, which I had no schooling for other than them. I'll leave a link to the white paper for the Decware Corner Horn in the comments. It was an interesting experience to write because I built the speaker solely guided by instincts and then had to reverse engineer it to see what I had actually done to write the white paper. Remember, when you're playing around with your stereo and a tiny voice in your head gives you the impulse to try something crazy that can't possibly work, try actually doing it and seeing what happens. Decware is what happened for me. Thanks for listening and have a great day.